How's it going, everyone? I'm Klidge, and today I'm going to give a rundown for new players of who I would recommend you level first by class in Fate Grand Order. For the most part, this list is only going to contain servants that can be found in the free-to-play gacha and servants that are locked up until you complete Camelot. So, if you're just starting out in FGO, these are the servants I would recommend you level first. So just a running trend you'll notice in these is that a lot of them are going to be arts units, and this is because arts units are the easiest to work with in the early game. I believe all these servants also have upgraded NPs that are easy to access, so they will do more of what they do best. Also, a side note to this is that this list is entirely gameplay focused, so if you see Matahari when you just start and you love her to death, then by God, level her first. There's no shame in that at all, and honestly it's how you should decide who to level. But if you're here to get on that early game grind, then let's begin. For Sabers, it's gotta be Caesar. In terms of raw damage potential and support capabilities, Caesar has you covered on both ends. He has an okay charisma and a decent party-wide NP damage up, but his third skill is by far his best one. A targetable 40% crit damage up with an additional 100% crit star generation up makes for a powerful crit support skill. This is the role where Caesar shines the most, and he is versatile enough to fill it in almost all teams. But wait, it gets better. This rotund ruler comes packing with a huge single target NP that adds to his ability to create stars while also dishing out some serious damage. This skill will be buffed during the Valentine's 2022 event and will give him one of the highest damaging NPs in the game, even hitting harder than some 5-star Sabers. So, he's a character that he is already good and is just going to get better. So with that, show the guy some love, because there's a lot of them to go around. Alright, so there's an issue with recommending an archer to level first, a single archer to level first. That's because the archer class has some of the most powerful cheap servants in the game, and honestly, this recommendation depends largely on who you roll as your 4-star. But, by and large, the one who stands above all others in terms of sheer value and versatility is the sleazy sheepish sheep herder, David. He acts as a support with some DPS capabilities, but honestly, he's meant to be a support. He has a decent charisma and a personal heal, but who gives a shit about that when you can AoE evade? David's second skill allows him to effectively prevent an AoE NP from wiping your team, and in the same breath giving a little heal and clearing their mental debuffs, which for the uninitiated is usually your stuns and your skill seals. This skill is so useful in the early game when Berserkers are the meta that it's worth dumping everything into it. He also has a single target buster NP, but it's just okay, because again, he's not a DPS. It does have skill seal on it, so that is kind of useful sometimes. I think it's only fair that I throw in a DPS archer for this as well, because sometimes firepower is what you need more than defense. So my pick for that is a tie between Uriel and Robin Hood. I personally lean more towards Uriel, however. I'm okay with comparing them like this because they serve the same purpose and are equally effective in their roles. Uriel is able to charm lock male enemies for long swaths of time in a cheap setup, and additionally deals ridiculous amounts of damage to those male enemies with her NP. It's actually ridiculous and makes her viable against all male enemies save for Lancers. Robin, on the other hand, relies on poisoning enemies to drop his massive tree on people's heads. This can be made more consistent with poison command codes if you have them. Robin also excels at NP spamming due to his golden rule and third skill, which give him stars to help along with the process. Both of them are art servants who excel at nuking, and both of them will help you throughout the story mode, even into the late game if you invest into them. It's cool. I don't know what you were expecting. I could realistically end this part right now, but I'll do my due diligence to describe this durable dog. So, Ku's claim to fame is his ability to be practically immortal. He has a 3-hit evade, a guts, a heal, and a debuff remover. His kit alone screams survivability, but he is also capable of slapping the early game around with his damage. So, something that new players may not be aware of, and maybe some veteran players, in that each class has a damage modifier that either boosts or decreases their base attack. Assassins, for example, deal less damage than their base damage by a multiplier of 0.9. Lancers, on the other hand, deal more damage by a multiplier of 1.05. Now this may not seem significant, but it is worth mentioning, and that extra spike may be just what you need. The other thing with Ku is that he will grow in value as time goes on, as his guts gets a significant buff during the 5th anniversary, which will play on his infinite survivability by increasing his damage based on how low his health is. Realistically, this buff wasn't even needed. Ku currently outclasses the entire 1 to 3-star Lancer roster, the vast majority of the 4-star Lancers, and some of the 5-star ones. The only budget Lancer that comes close in my mind to being leveled before Ku is Leonidas, but that's hardly a close second. To put this into perspective, I've been playing FGO for a while, I have a decent roster to choose from, but the only character that I pick to beat archer bosses that isn't my level 70 Ku is Enkidu, who is also a survival monster that does crazy damage. So, the long story short is you want to level Gareth first. Ushi Wakamaru is an invaluable character to have leveled, and not just in the early game, but for all levels of gameplay.
What about George?
George is the best tank.
She doesn't have a 3-turn taunt. Really, why?
Or just buys cause she's thick.
Ushi fulfills a vital role being a single target DPS rider. For reference, she's the only one in the free-to-play gacha, and no, George does not count, he's a support, not a DPS. This gives Ushi a powerful anti-caster boss niche, which shows up a fair amount throughout the game, but is very prevalent in the early game. To give a rundown of her skill set, to put it bluntly, it's pretty bland. But sometimes, simplicity is best. She has an NP gain buff for the party, which also boosts her quick damage, a decent charisma, and an evade, which increases her star drop rate, but honestly, that's more of a joke than anything. Her charisma gets an enormous buff with the release of the Little Big Tengu event that NA will be getting in January of 2023 at the rate that we're going. This is to say that she gets even better than she currently is. But even without this buff, she is still an absolute unit. Her damage is good, her star weight is great because of her rider class, and she helps the team with her kit, and her NP hits like a goddamn freight train. There is no good reason to not have her leveled. Praise be to Pinta. Alright, so the assassin class is kind of a mixed bag of weirdos. They, more than any other class, fill a wide variety of roles, from a defensive support character, to crit supports, to star generators, to DPS, etc, etc, etc. They can do anything. As a result, however, most assassins fall into a very, very small niche, meaning that they excel at one hyper-specific thing and are crap at everything else. For that reason, the consistency of 100 Face Hassan is a breath of fresh air. 100 Face is a single target art servant who excels at NP spamming. Her perplexity for this is due in large part to her 2 arts cards, multi-hit arts NP, and her first skill. She also boasts a strong projection-like skill, and a 4000 HP heal. She also has an NP interlude once you finish Camelot that increases the damage and reduces arch resistance of enemies. So, what that means is that the whole party essentially gets an NP up while attacking the affected enemy with an arts card. 100 Face also has a powerful bonus on her NP, which reduces enemy crit chance. All of this is rolled into one package and makes her a true force to be reckoned with. When I myself was completely new to FGO and had no idea about metas or even the importance of leveling skills, I took my 100 Faces everywhere, and up until Camelot, she was one of my main DPS. So, take it from someone who is going in blind about how good she is. By far, the budget casters are the hardest ones to rank in terms of who to level first, and that's because so many of them are broken. Like, what the fuck? Why does Chen Gong do that? Anyways, I recommend you level Hans first. In general, Hans is the best budget caster, and that is solely because he's the most versatile. Chen Gong is great with Berserkers and good with all others. Paracelsus is great in an arts team and good everywhere else. This is a trend among all the budget support casters except Hans, who's always great, and sometimes godly, that being on a crit team. He has a targetable NP generator and a star maker, a huge NP gauge up skill, and a party-wide crit up. Couple this with his good NP gain, 3 art deck, and an NP that, while chance-based, gives so many buffs, he is simply the epitome of a godlike support. Plus, he's only a 2-star, so he costs pretty much nothing. His one downside is that he has low HP and low attack, but honestly, for everything else that he does, who cares? So the biggest strength of the Berserker class is also its greatest flaw, that being class advantage. Berserkers that are able to take full advantage of their class are some of the best servants of the game, such as Arjuna Alter, Ku Alter, and Heracles. But, in return, they have to be able to live long enough to slap around your enemies. This puts Berserkers in a precarious place because it gives them one of 2 playstyles. You either kill fast and die young, or surround yourself with supportive friends. Both are fairly effective, but there is one cheap Berserker who shines through in the friend point gacha, who can easily do both. Spartacus. Old Sparty Boy touts an impressive amount of self-sustain in his kit despite his class. Plus, and this is absolutely worth mentioning, all of his strengthenings are done through strengthening quests rather than interludes. So once you get him to his 4th ascension, you can immediately get all the goods. So, investing in him early gives you a great return investment, but it goes even further than that. Let's take a deeper look into what these great self-sustained skills are. Disclaimer, these skills and all others are judged based on post-strengthening, and if they are available in A as of the release of this video, they are also judged based on them being at max level. First off is a straight-up heal that occurs every turn for 5 turns for 1500 health at max with a 7-turn cooldown. His second skill is a Guts, which also charges his NP by up to 30%. His third skill is a 40% Buster Up Mana Burst, which also heals him for 2000. His NP is an AoE Buster Nuke that further heals him for 4000 at no overcharge, and 8000 at max overcharge. This makes Spartacus ideal for 2 things: farming and consistent DPS, given you can support him. He's strong enough to hold his own in a fight for a while by popping his Guts turn 1, and then waiting to get hit, then using his first skill to maintain a steady stream of healing. Then, once he's low or his Guts goes off, you can drop his NP and essentially get back to full health. Alternatively, you can throw him into a team to just fire off his NP and wipe a wave and then kill him off. Chen Gong is really good for this. His versatility in being a beat stick, along with being an effective farmer in a budget setup, makes him an excellent choice for new masters. There are no budget rulers, avengers, alter egos, pretenders, foreigners, whatever. And no, I can't in good conscience recommend that anybody level on Gremlin, so I won't. If you're having trouble against a ruler, use Sparty. But there is one extra class servant who is free to play, and that is the OG waifu herself, Mash. If you watched my 1 to 3 star or 4 star tier list videos, you know that I think exceedingly high of Mash as a unit. So I'll mostly be reiterating the points I made there, here. Mash is a tank, to put it lightly. She has a massive party-wide defense up, a targetable invincibility, and a taunt which essentially allows her to use her NP the following turn. If you have a Brave Chain, her invincibility is also targetable and gives NP as well. Her NP is a party-wide defense buff which gets better after Camelot because it will also boost party attack except for herself, and also increases the defense that she gives. I am going to make an exception for Mash in this video and mention that she gets better as time goes on, because she's the only servant who evolves consistently with the gameplay. Much of her abilities and ascensions are limited by how far you've progressed in the game, but the trade-off is that she is constantly getting better. After Camelot, you've got your standard Mash. This version of Mash is kind of like her final evolved form, if you will, until other shit happens, but I'm not going to get into that. She is the best budget support, period. A side note that is worth mentioning as well is that you always have room for her because her cost is 0. She was designed to be your best girl throughout the entire game, and it blows my mind that there are people who are level 130 plus who still have her at level 70 with a 111. So here's a minor spoiler for all of you who are brand new. There are going to be times in the game that you have to have Mash on your team. There are times when she's going to be the only character on your team, so you're really shooting yourself in the foot by not leveling her. Not to mention that all of her skills are relatively cheap to level. So take care of your Kohai, guys. She deserves it more than anyone else. Who can forget their first 4-star? So, something to know for all you new and prospective players is that when you do your first summon, you're guaranteed a 4-star servant. You can get one of the following for sure, and possibly others that are in the gacha, but for the sake of this list, we're going to stick with the guarantees. You can get Siegfried, Suzuka, Emiya, Adelante, Parvati, Liz, Marie, Martha, Nursery Rhyme, Helena, Steno, Carmilla, Herc, and Tamakat. By and large, most of these servants will make your life easier in the early game, because most of them offer something good to new players. But should you level them first before the budget options? Well, let's take a look. Starting with Sabers, we have Suzuka and Siegfried. Both of them are very good choices and clean up the early game well. Siegfried has a strong anti-dragon niche, which is very prevalent in the early game, and Suzuka is an NP spamming crit monster who is great at all times. But I think the order in which you would want to level them is like this. For archers, we have Emiya and Adelante. I recommend that you level Emiya first because he is one of the best units in the game hands down. And will serve you well as an archer. Atalante is okay, but relies on some of the top tier supports to really shine, so my leveling order would be like this. For Lancers, you're going to want to level Ku before either Liz or Par. Liz is fine, Par is really good, Ku is just fantastic. Par is an excellent AoE Lancer and one of the high rolls from the starter gacha, but Ku is much more versatile, so I would have to say that the list looks like this. For Riders, level Ushi before both Martha and Marie. Marie is fine, she's gotten a lot better with her buffs, and Martha is absolutely fantastic, but you will get more consistent mileage out of your Ushi. That said, Martha is still an amazing unit, so if you do get her, level her soon after. For casters, both Nursery Rhyme and Helena are excellent units. Nursery is a crit farming servant, and Helena is an all-purpose support. I would highly recommend leveling Helena if you get her, so my order looks something like this. That is, unless you roll Herc, then you want to go with Chen Gong and dedicate the early game to a Masher Gong combo. For Assassins, we have Carmilla and Steno. Personally, I would say Carmilla is slightly better than 100 Face, but it's fairly close. Always level 100 Face before Steno, though. Steno gets much better in the late game, but in the early game, she's just not great. So I'd say my list looks something like this. And finally, for the Berserkers, both should be leveled before Spartacus. Herc is the highest high roll of all of these early game servants, and he is worth re-rolling if you're trying to do the meta, because he can practically solo every single fight in the early game, and is still a monster unit in the late game. Atomic Hat is not as good as Herc, but she is still a solid Berserker. Plus, with her buffs, she has gotten significantly tankier and no longer has to worry about the demerit on her NP. So, my list looks something like this. So that's that! Let me know what you think in the comments, tell me how horribly wrong I am, or give me your own recommendations, because I love to see them. If you like, do the like thing, it really does help. I hope the best for all of you new players out there. Check out my Twitch channel, because upcoming is the Guildfest event, and I'm going to be streaming that, doing some fun challenge quest stuff, and I hope to see you guys all later. Peace out.